What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Somewhat Sports Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by two of the titans in the sports media industry, Jurg and Dame. Fellas, how are we this week?
Another week, another time to record and just talk straight up sports, boys. The Somewhat Sports Podcast, as always, on a weekly basis, bringing to you the greatest sports show on the planet.
I'm exhausted, bro. That's all I gotta say. It's been a long week at work, but almost at the end. Almost here at Thanksgiving. I'm ready for some food.
That's nice. That's real nice.
Oh, we gotta figure out what we're doing for the podcast next week. Just realized that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that off mic. But I hope you guys have had a good week. I hope everyone's had a good week. I hope everyone has had a good week except for those who leaked the Spider-Man trailer. Not you fuckers. I hope you guys are rotten hell. Anyway, let's move on from that. It's a different convo for a different podcast. I think it's a relatively simple week for the Somewhat Sports Podcast this week because we're doing baseball. That's right. We've been sucking off the NBA and the NFL for the last, who knows what weeks, how many weeks, whatever weeks. We feel like we're not giving enough love for baseball. I feel like the last time we talked about them was when we talked about the Braves winning the World Series, and that's just not enough. And free agency is around the corner, and these two beasts that are accompanying me in this sports journey, they want to talk some baseball. They want to talk about possible moves, possible predictions, the whole 9 yards. So Jurg and Dame, you guys are steering the ship this week. So Jurg, can you tell the people what we have lined up for this week's episode?
Absolutely. So it is a free agency frenzy for Major League Baseball right now. Of course, the offseason is in its earliest stages, and already we've seen a couple signings, a couple players opting out, a couple qualifying offers of the like, and a few notable ones have happened so far. We're going to have brief conversations here in a moment about that, but the main event, the main course of this episode is going to be the fact that myself and Dame, we're going to be looking at some of the biggest pitching and hitting names in this year's free agency market, and we're going to give our thoughts and analysis on the best fit for these guys. Yes, not straight up predictions, because me and Dame were talking about this before the show. Like, there's some weird ass signings that happen every once in a while. Back with Dame, the one that we pointed out was when Madison Bumgarner signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks, whatever it was, I think 2 off seasons ago at this point. To this day, it still remains one of the most questionable signings, as like, why did Arizona give him that deal? Why did he want to go there? But irregardless, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be more so giving our best fits for these free agents of the like. And yeah, that's what it's going to be. But like I said, we're going to start things off with some of the notable signings so far. Dame, a lot of early activity in the pitching market, at least a couple of the names coming off the board. Which one of these do you want to hit on first? Because quite a few big names have already come off.
Let's get the Verlander one out the way. I'll start off. I wanted him to go to the Yankees. I thought it would have been very similar to the Corey Kluber move, but just better because Verlander has pitched in the postseason. He's widely regarded as one of the best postseason pitchers ever. He's obviously been there, done it before, unlike Kluber, and his injury history isn't as bad as Kluber's was. It was just Tommy John compared to Kluber, who's had multiple different kind of injuries on that arm. So, personally, I really want him to go to the Yankees, and I know the Yankees are interested. So at first I saw that he rejected a qualifying offer, which the deadline was yesterday, and I was like, oh, okay, that's step one. And literally like 5 minutes later, his brother tweets out that he's signing with the Astros. I'm like, all right. So that lasted about 5 minutes. My hope is gone, and the Yankees are back to not being interested in anybody that's good and wanting to spend money. So for the Astros, obviously, though, it's great. They got their ace back. Should be fully healthy after a year and a half off. They got relatively good deal, 2 years, $50 million. It's really 1 for 25, but there's a player option for $25 million, which I'm sure he's going to take the year after. So for them, it's definitely great, especially because they might be losing Zach Greinke as well and Carlos Correa on the offensive end. So for both, I think it's great. But me personally, as a Yankee fan, I kind of wanted him to come here, but it is what it is. I'm not surprised.
Right, and it's not a surprise that Houston made sure that they could keep him, because I think what we saw in the postseason after they lost McCullers, their pitching rotation was really shot in the World Series when it came to having to start a guy or two, a lot quicker than they would have intended to. And ultimately, it just comes down to the fact that we kind of brought this up a week or two ago when we talked about the Braves and the postseason in general. It's just that you need depth. And I think especially for the Astros, they have some solid young pitchers, McCullers being the best of them, but they need more veterans there. And it doesn't surprise me that they ended up making sure that they retain Verlander. I also think probably because I would assume that while they did trade for Greinke way back, I don't think there's any pressure to keep him. And I think between the two of them, it was obvious that they were much rather going to retain Verlander as opposed to Greinke. And of course, as we know, Correa likely heading out, but we'll get to him in a couple of moments' time. One of the other ones that I want to talk about here is the Mets continue to just lose pitchers in these off seasons, right? They lost Wheeler a couple off seasons ago to the Phillies, and now they lose Noah Syndergaard, Thor, to the LA Angels. A 1-year contract. I believe the price I saw was $21 million to get him over to Anaheim. The Angels pitching rotation has been garbage for quite a while now. They haven't necessarily been able to build a consistent core there. They've hit or miss here and there. They had Heaney for a while. He was fine, but then he leaves, and on some nights he would just get blasted. Ohtani is great, yes, but he's obviously, because of his duties as a hitter, he can't technically be the ace of the rotation. I mean, he can be, but you would much rather prefer if he could be the second or third guy. So it's been all about having to build a pitching rotation, which is one of the key flaws that this team has struggled with during the Mike Trout tenure. And I think Syndergaard can help. It's been very limited for him the last 2 seasons due to injuries, but I think he has been making his way back. I think he'll look good. I think this is a low-risk signing because it's a 1-year deal is the thing. So obviously, I think Syndergaard knew, and based off of this market we're going to get to, I think he understood that he wasn't going to get the long-term deal he would have hoped. So I think this is a very intelligent move by him. Just go for the big 1-year deal now. You could cash out next season in free agency, being one of the predominant names if you have a good year, and he's going to have that opportunity to do. He's going to be the first or second guy in this rotation no matter what. That's just about a guarantee. And yeah, I think it was a good signing for him. And I think for the Angels, a low risk signing for a guy who he's proven himself before, former All-Star. He's performed at a good level. I think this could really be a win-win for both sides, especially for Syndergaard if he's able to cash out. Dame, what did you think of? Were you shocked when you saw that? Because it was so quick. With his, it was one of the first signings here within the last couple of days. This is like the pre-free agency period, if we're being honest, because not all these big names are going to get signed just yet. But what were your thoughts when you saw the Syndergaard to Angels news?
I was definitely shocked how quick it was. But as for the fit, I really like it. But let me just throw a shot here at the Mets fans. It's been a rough start to the offseason for them. No one wants to be their team president. No one wants to be their general manager. Clearly, no players want to go there. Noah Syndergaard was beloved by that fan base and that team, and he left over $2.5 million. It's been a rough start for them, but hopefully for them it changes and turns around. Maybe I have a couple big names going there in my predictions and fits. Maybe I don't, but as of right now, Steve Cohen era has not been off to a great start. He was supposed to influence guys to want to come here because of the checkbook that he has, but so far it hasn't been the case. But as for Noah Syndergaard and the Angels, I think it's a great fit. I feel like every offseason since Mike Trout's been a superstar, the main goal has been to put a contender around him, and it starts with the starting pitching rotation. I don't even remember last time the Angels did have a solid pitching rotation, and every offseason it's the same thing. So adding a guy like Noah Syndergaard, who, yes, he's coming off Tommy John, and he pitched pretty well down the stretch for the Mets in that last month when he was starting to come back. But this guy clearly has an insane amount of talent. He throws 100 miles per hour, has a 92 mile per hour slider, 92 mile per hour changeup. The stuff he has is nasty and powerful. So adding that to the Angels' non-existent rotation for just 1 year, you kind of see what he has. If you like what you see, you can always extend him if he likes it there. But for the Angels, you really just got to add any kind of potential you can into that rotation. So it's really good for them. And for Noah Syndergaard, you pitched a month to show yourself that you still have it. Coming off Tommy John, you get $21 million. For him, that's pretty good, I think. And he could just reset his market if he pitches well this offseason. And if not, he got $21 million in the bag for a month of showing himself coming back from Tommy John.
Right. And I think ultimately it could be good for both sides. And that's typically what we'll see in the early parts of this offseason. Guys signing business contracts really for themselves. And that was a business decision by Syndergaard and his crew. Since you mentioned it, Dame, I guess before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything, we could bring it up. And I want Chris's opinion from a certain perspective of this. Billy Epler being hired to be the Mets GM. it's very intriguing. I think there's a couple different ways to look at this. Dame, he was in the Yankees front office for quite a while. That's really where he built his name up as a potential GM candidate early on in his career. He got a chance with the Angels in the mid to late parts of the 2010s, and I believe he was their general manager even up until
Yeah.
last season before he was, eventually, relieved of his duties. What was your reaction there? And Chris, this question is going to come after, so whenever Dame is finished, I want you to jump in on it with just the idea of a lot of names declined the opening as Mets general manager. So, Chris, when Dame is finished, the question to you would be, how does that make you feel that this many guys avoided the Mets GM job? And is Epler, are you kind of settling for him at this point, or is there a shot that he can potentially help build up something here in New York? But Dame, you first.
Listen, I feel like it was every day or every week that some big name was rejecting the Mets, whether to interview or to go over there. Like, clearly it wasn't about the money because Steve Cohen, of course, would have paid whatever he needed to get a general manager there, especially a top tier one. But literally, no one even wanted to interview with them or nothing. I don't know what that's about. I don't know what it is, but it was a bad sign. But as it is to Billy Epler, like, he obviously wasn't as advertised as he was on the Angels, but I mean, he did get Mike Trout to sign the extension. He got Shohei Ohtani there. He got Carlos Rendon there. His main thing he couldn't build a starting rotation, which has failed the Angels, like I said, for a few years now. But coming from the Yankees, he obviously has that kind of experience behind Brian Cashman, all these great execs that the Yankees do have. So that is a plus. It's better than nothing. It's not. It's better than bringing someone up from their own organization, since we know the Mets haven't really been the most stable organization for the past 10, 15 years. So getting a guy with Yankee experience, I know the Yankees haven't really won in a while, but they're every single year they're contending. So bringing an exec from those roots, I think is pretty good for them. But yeah, it's concerning to me. I would be, as a Mets fan, if all these guys are rejecting the team, especially after you just signed this new eye-popping owner that's willing to spend anything he wants.
Chris?
Yeah, so I can't speak, I can't speak for this as much as like you guys can because I'm not familiar with the names. I don't know baseball that well, but I will tell you what I think as a Mets fan from looking outside the glass. We should have had Manny for this segment, the true Mets fans, but I don't know, man. It seems like the Mets are a stuck in the mud type of team. Um, I guess the allure isn't there, and like there's talent on the Mets too, so it's not like they're just like a complete bottom tier. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's Uncle like people don't want to work with Cohen. Maybe I don't know. Could that be it?
It could be that like I mentioned this right when the Mets got sold to him. Like, these extremely rich owners are so rich that they feel like they need to put their word into it on the baseball operations, and I just feel like that never works. I always feel like the owner should always leave it up to the baseball minds and the people that know what they're talking about. And I just feel like when the rich owner tries to put his input on things that he's not as knowledgeable about as baseball operations people are, I think that's when it goes wrong. And that could be something that's making these general manager candidates not want to go there because they feel like they're not going to have full control over what's going on.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Jurg. Go ahead.
No, my bad. I kind of want to bring that up to Dame because I think it's got to be something that we're not seeing here, Chris. I really do because this team has talent. They have a couple nice hitters in the lineup. They gave Lindor that contract, and for as poorly as season one did for him, he was doing better. He was doing better at the end, more than the beginning. I know it's not a high bar to clear, but he wasn't a 150 average hitter. That would have been worst case. He did get his average up there. He looked a little bit better. They made the move for Javi Baez, showing that they're willing to make the decisions to bring in a guy like that if need be. They had the pitching rotation there. If DeGrom had never gotten hurt, that team's chances would have been a lot better consistently throughout the season. I really think it's just something we're not seeing here. And is it up to Cohen? Because we see what meddlesome owners in sports do, man. They ruin everything. They ruin it so you can't even honor a player's jersey retirement properly, Washington. So when you have stuff like that happening, it's just like, I really got to wonder, like, well, Steve Cohen's supposed to be the new guy. He's supposed to be, the Mets are going to hit the refresh button with him, but it still feels like the same damn team again. And at this point, you're not going to get a new owner this quickly. So it's like, what the hell do you got to do to fix everything around there?
Like, look at it this way. Like, I think the Mets job offer, general manager position, was one that's really intriguing because, look, you have your the best pitcher in the league. You have Lindor, a top 3 shortstop in the league. You extended him too. You have a pretty good farm system. I think it's a top 10 farm system. And this upcoming draft, they have the 11th overall pick and the 14th overall pick. So they have 2 first round picks and they have 6 picks in the top 100. Like, obviously the MLB draft is very different from the NFL and NBA, but 6 top 100 picks is extremely intriguing to a general manager candidate. You have all these picks and prospects that you can rebuild the team with, and you still have a pretty good MLB roster with the unlimited amount of money to spend. So it's just mind-boggling to me what general manager wouldn't want to go there with all these things for them to operate with.
Sounds like we're 10 steps behind, man. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because I thought with Cohen, with Uncle Stevie taking, taking ownership and, with the Lindor trade, I'm like, all right, things are looking up. Things are looking up. And then they made that trade, I believe, for Baez, was it?
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, it can't be that bad. But, like, Syndergaard leaving and all this stuff happening, I don't know, man. Feels like the Mets are stuck in the mud, which is the worst possible place to be. Yeah, it's just they don't have the same allure as the Yankees, so you're already kind of like competing for second in the New York market. So that's tough, but that's how it is. That's what it is. So that's all I have to say about it.
Right, right. And hey, sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles. And maybe, like Dame alluded to, this is a start, just a bad start to an offseason where the Mets can rebound and, bring things to a complete 180 if they are able to. But of course, that remains to be seen. And that's really all the big news. Like, I guess Jose Barrios signing his contract with the Blue Jays is something, but let's be real here. They were probably going to maintain him no matter what. They re-signed him. I personally don't really have that much to say, Dame. So if you don't, we could just move on to
No,
our
I
game.
don't. No.
Yeah. So let's move on. So we have here a little game, a bit of a spin on, some of the other stuff that we've done before. The most notable one being that NBA free agency game that we did a while back. And this one in particular, we kind of have one with MLB, but we're not doing a point system or with predictions. We're going to do it based off of best fits that we see between myself and Dame. Chris, if you have any teams, of course, as well, like in terms of specific players, you, of course, are free to chime in. You've mainly left this to us, so I don't know how many you have, but of course, if you are free to, you are more than willing to comment.
Okay. All right.
Okay, then. So let's get it going. Let's start with pitchers. Honestly, we've been talking about pitchers this whole time. Let's keep it going. Let's stick with the arms in this one, boys. Damn, I'm going to throw this first one to you. Mad Max Scherzer was acquired by the Dodgers at the deadline as a part of the Trey Turner deal. Played amazing second half of the season for them, and if it wasn't for his arm getting dinged up at the end, maybe they would have had more of a shot at the playoffs in the NLCS. But what is his future? Does he stay in LA with the Dodgers? Does he go to the Angels maybe, or does he just leave? What are you thinking about a good old Mad Max?
I think the perfect fit for him is to stay with the Dodgers. They didn't offer Clayton Kershaw a qualifying offer, so might look like Clayton Kershaw's on his way out there. And you still don't know the whole Trevor Bauer situation, what's going to happen with that, if he's back or not. So you really can't leave, as the Dodgers, you can't leave yourself with just Walker Buehler in your rotation after maybe losing Bauer and losing Clayton Kershaw. And obviously, Mad Max, the second half of the season with the Dodgers, he had like a 1.8 ERA. He averaged like over 8 strikeouts a inning. He was runner up to the NL Cy Young yesterday. Like, Matt, he was everything you asked for when you traded for him. So I think the best bet is for him to go back to the Dodgers. Short term deal with a very high AAV. To me, that's the best fit for him.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. I'm all in agreement. I think if we shot it over to Chris as well, I think he would agree. There's no reason for Mad Max to leave. It was really good how he performed, really revitalized himself. He looked a lot better as a Dodger, so I think it just makes sense for him. I think the only question will be how long they sign him for, because he is getting up there in age, but he still proved that he could be that dude when they need him to be. I just think the question, and with how good Walker Buehler is, I think it'll be about where they place him in the rotation. I don't see him as being the number one guy, just because I think it's better for the Dodgers if they allow him to, be that second or third player for the every 5 days. Kind of not. It doesn't necessarily give him rest, but I think it would just be better for him as he goes against like fellow pitching matchups, and especially come the postseason. Maybe if they could play with the math there towards the end, they could keep him fresh for the early portions of the playoffs, which, looking back, him being fresh was the ultimate difference between them and how that Brave series ended up. Chris, do you have anything to interject, or are you kind of with us? Mad Max is likely staying in LA.
I mean, I think he's staying in LA. I don't know. For me, the Dodgers are always in contention to sign everyone. So I don't know. Yeah, I'd agree that I think it's best fit right there for both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's stay with the good old white and blue with the Dodgers, and let's talk about Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw, like Dame said, they did not give him a qualifying offer. It brings up a lot of questions about it. Kershaw has not been the same guy he was at his peak, who was probably the best pitcher in the game in his best years. The only guy that really could challenge him is, ironically, who eventually became his teammate, Max Scherzer. Two of them, three-time Cy Young Award winners. Kershaw has won an MVP award in his career, absolutely outstanding throughout his time as a Dodger, but has been starting to suffer some injuries here and there. Was actually healthy in 2020, but this past season ended the season on the injured. They call it the IL now, the injured list or whatever. Personally speaking, and I don't know if this is the most likely scenario anymore, but I just don't see a world where Clayton Kershaw is not a Los Angeles Dodger. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think declining the qualifying offer, or like them not offering, necessarily means he's gone. I just think to me, there's got to be some sort of understanding in the organization that they need to handle a couple things before they bring him back, and they want to make sure everything is set. And I think the number one thing is that Bauer contract, because I have to believe that because of what happened with the Bauer situation, if he can't get cleared to play, there's got to be a way they could get out of that deal. Like, I know they just keep on waiting and waiting for him to be able to play, but there's got to be a way. If it's cut and dry and he wouldn't be able to come back, then I think there's a way to get out of that. And then again, with the Dodgers, money is never really an issue anyways. I think that they can keep Kershaw. I don't think it'll be for long term. I could see them just working on a 1-year deal, let him ride out this season, and then maybe he retires after this year. I know it would be super young. He's not that old compared to most guys, especially compared to Scherzer. But at the same time, like, it's just what purpose is it for him to leave? Like, I know he's accomplished anything, but I just don't see any reason for him leaving. But we've been wrong before about this stuff, and damned if we'll be wrong again. So, Dame, what about you? Is Kershaw staying in Los Angeles, or is he calling somewhere else a new home?
It's tough for me to see him leaving the Dodgers as well. However, I do have his fit as being the White Sox. Now, the White Sox obviously this year had that big three with Giolito, Lance Lynn, and Carlos Rendon. But Carlos Rendon is a free agent and didn't extend a qualifying offer to him, no matter how good he was. So to me, that looks like he might be leaving. And I think because of how young this rotation is, how young this team is, they need another veteran presence there, especially in that rotation, because Lance Lynn is really the only veteran they do have. So I think bringing a guy like Clayton Kershaw is a really good fit because he's been there, done that. He's pitched in the postseason. Something when we did our MLB predictions, we talked about how we don't really trust the White Sox rotation because they're young and they haven't been experienced in the postseason. But I think a guy Clayton Kershaw, who although he's had his struggles in the postseason, the year they won the championship, he kind of overcame that. So adding him, put it there, and putting him at the third spot in that rotation behind Lance Lynn and Giolito will take a lot of pressure off him, as well as really helping Lance Lynn and Giolito because he can give his advice on how to pitch in the postseason, how to overcome that kind of pressure. So I think Clayton Kershaw and the White Sox is a really good fit.
Well, that's not a bad one, honestly. If he is going somewhere, a team like the White Sox would make sense. It's just man, I don't know. I just it's kind of a bias, but like I don't like seeing him go away. Like it sucks when these guys can't stay on one team forever because I think that's going to become so rare in sports. It's just it would suck. Chris, like, do you envision a world here pretty soon where there's no Kershaw in LA?
Yeah. I mean, he's been with them his whole career. Yeah.
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 I mean, look, he won his championship there in 2020, so I think he's done his part. I don't think there would be any bad blood between him and the organization or him and his fans. I do think his time is up, and I do think the White Sox, that's an interesting destination for him because they're kind of a young and upcoming team who just made the playoffs, so they have experience, and I think Kershaw definitely I think adds that veteran presence for a team that's trying to take the next step. So I kind of like it, Dame. I kind of like it.
Yeah, it was definitely a good shout right there from Dame because I think Kershaw is going to be one of the big names we watch out for because where he goes could really change things and change a bit of a power dynamic for sure, and Chicago could make some sense. But speaking of a guy who could shift things a bit, and especially if he's playing well, Marcus Stroman, right? He suffered was traded to the Mets, right? He sat out 2020, played with the Mets essentially the entire season in 2021. Uh, Performed relatively well. I think a ERA of just above 3, just under 160 strikeouts. that it's good. It's not elite, but it's pretty dang good if you're talking about maybe a number 2, but at best a number 3, depending on how stacked your rotation is. Dame, this is one of those guys where it's like I could see him going to like kind of a weird team. Now, I do have a team in mind that I think would be interested in him. I want to get your thoughts on where he's going to head up first.
Well, I think it's a very strong possibility he goes to back to the Mets because they did lose Syndergaard. But again, with the way this offseason is going for the Mets, I'm going to go a different direction. My fit for Marcus Stroman is the St. Louis Cardinals. Obviously, every single year the St. Louis Cardinals are good, and they're not really a big free agent spending team. They kind of just build within and then with trades. But I feel like they haven't really added a big money free agent to either their rotation or their bullpen in a while. So I think this is the year they do it. Marcus Stroman is coming off arguably his best season of his career. He's not really a strikeout pitcher. He's kind of a ground ball pitcher, something that the Cardinals really like and play to because they have such a good defense behind them with Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, of course. So Marcus Stroman, I think, really plays to the strengths of that team and that ballpark. So I think this is the year the Cardinals finally spend that money in that rotation and try to go for that next step and make the playoffs and go even further. So I think these two parties are a really good fit for each other.
Not a bad fit there at all. I think it would be interesting to see St. Louis spend. Like you said, they don't really do that for a lot of guys. They tend to trade for those big names, which they've done these last couple off seasons. They traded for Arenado and got some of that contract paid off. They traded for Goldschmidt. Granted, they did end up extending him to a pretty big money deal, but that was done via trade, right? And where they could control and get him to the contract they wanted, not necessarily with playing free agency, at least from memory. So that's not bad at all. So for my personal signing for Marcus Stroman, there's an old saying, gentlemen, and it's that I'd rather trust the devil I know than the devil I don't. And so I have Marcus Stroman signing with the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox know what he's about. We saw last season that this Red Sox offense essentially carried them consistently throughout the season. Let's be real here. That Red Sox pitching rotation was not spectacular in any way, shape, or form, right? And when I consider that, kind of like you said, Dame Stroman, he can collect some strikeouts. He had some pretty good games, especially this past season with, I don't know if he set a career high or he was close to tying his career high in strikeouts, but about 160, that's not a bad mark for him and for a pitcher in general. I think that Boston going after a guy like Stroman makes sense. They know him. He knows them. I think he would very much like to not have to deal with those hitters whenever, it comes to playing in that stadium. And I think that stadium kind of helps him because the Green Monster being there, we saw what it did to the Yankees. I think he's going to get saved from a couple of homers here and there if he does end up giving them up. And like you said, the defense, like this Red Sox team showed some pretty good defense in that postseason run. So that I think helps. Well, I actually think the Cardinals, I think your team might be the better fit than mine personally, Dame, but I still think I could see the Red Sox giving him a pretty nice deal. He gets to go back to the AL East. There's some familiarity there. And again, like Boston knows of him, and I think for Boston right now, when it comes to building that pitching rotation, they need guys that they know can perform. And Stroman is one of the bona fide guys that they know him inside and outside. So that's what I have. Chris, we both have him leaving. Since we talked about the Mets quite a bit so far, are you stressed about the potential of them keeping him, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am stressed because if they do lose him, I'm like, oh, that's 2 pitchers that we drop. I mean, there's a reason why the Mets pitching is considered top tier in the MLB. So if you're losing 2 Titans in that department, I don't know. Then we have to have a serious dialogue about the Mets, right? But I do think you're right, Jurg. I don't know if you said it or Dave said it, but with Syndergaard leaving, I think they're gonna prioritize him a little more intensively. I mean, you gotta have your destination for him, the Red Sox. I think you got to talk to Dame about that because I don't know if he's gonna be too happy about it.
I hope so. I hate him, so I hope he goes to Red Sox so he can rock him 5 times a year.
Okay.
It's Dame approved.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, but I still think I think you're right, Jurg. I think he'll stay with the Mets, but I don't know. I mean, the Mets are kind of a wild card in terms of what they're doing, but I am a little concerned. But I don't think I'd be that mad, to be honest. I don't know. Because then I feel
he's a herb.
Because it forces the Mets to make serious moves after that if they lose him, right? Because then they're gonna have to I feel like the Mets need a reevaluation period, and I think losing Marcus Stroman would make them seriously consider things going forward. So I don't know. Maybe it'll be a wake up call. So that's the pro of it. The con is you're losing another pitcher on top of Syndergaard. So I don't know. I'm looking at the positive things. I am concerned. Ultimately, don't think it'll happen. So yeah, mixed answer. My bad.
No, it's fine. Like, it, when we're talking about fits, like I think all three teams we could argue we see it some way. Just the Mets, kind of like to your point with losing Syndergaard, does that maybe expedite the process of them trying to negotiate here with Stroman more before he really properly hits free agency? Because some of these deals are going to get done before the quote unquote free agency window opens up here. So there's definitely the potential of that happening, as well as the fact that maybe Stroman does just want to go. You know, he had a nice season in New York, and maybe he just cashes out somewhere else. You know, those New York taxes, man, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you want to leave it sometimes.
Yeah.
But speaking of guys potentially leaving, Zach Greinke of the Houston Astros. Houston traded for him quite a couple of years ago. They gave up, it was like a 4 prospect trade that they sent over to the Diamondbacks. Can't really grade on the Diamondbacks edge because they just suck. So we focus more on Houston. They
Hey,
made
hey,
a
no Diamondback slander. No Diamondback slander.
Fuck the
full,
Diamondbacks.
full Diamondback slander apparently. Greinke and the Astros, they made a couple World Series with him. You know, he's been relatively solid for them. He looked a lot better when he got to be behind Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander. That changed this season. Now, granted, he was still a reliable guy. I think his ERA was just over 4 this season. I think at this point in his career, that's kind of the number that we're going to get at with him. Like he's not a power pitcher. He's nowhere near a power pitcher. You know, even at his peak, he didn't necessarily have power. He's always been a finesse pitcher, can really work the count and can get a guy out on a ground ball. So it's really intriguing to see where he could go. Now, I've really debated this a lot, and I honestly do see him leaving, but I just can't think of a team necessarily because I actually switched a couple of my guys, you know, that we're going to get into here in a couple of moments on where I think they could land. So I'm just going to have him staying with the Astros for now. I'm not the biggest fan of that because I see it's more likely he leaves, but it could be a scenario where he just looks at everything and says, let me just stay here in Houston for another season. No reason for him to want to leave that organization at this moment in time, at least in my opinion. Dame, what are your thoughts on Greinke? I think of the names so far, Greinke's kind of the trickiest because he's not terrible, but how big is that market going to be for him?
Yeah, he is kind of a tricky one, and I wouldn't be surprised if he stays with the Astros. But I think it'd have to be a really low deal for them to keep him because they did just pay Verlander. But I have him going to the Angels. I know they just got Syndergaard, but obviously Syndergaard isn't gonna be enough when you need literally 5 starters on that team because everyone could go. The reason I think it's a good fit on the Angels is because although Greinke isn't that elite pitcher he used to be where he could win you games, he's not the pitcher that's going to lose you games either. Like you said, just over a 4 ERA, and that looks like what he's going to be for the rest of his career. That kind of ERA in the AL is, like I said, he's not going to win you games. He's not going to go 8 innings shutout and help you win the game, but he's not going to implode in 2 innings, give up 8 runs. He's not that kind of pitcher. So adding him to that Angels rotation with the offense they do have, he's going to give you 5 innings, 3 runs, 6 innings, 3 runs at best. And that offense should be able to do what they got to do to win that game. And he's also a guy that will eat innings up. So, again, the Angels don't have a starting rotation, but they don't have a bullpen either. So he's going to eat innings up, help rest that bullpen. He's going to give the Angels a chance to win each and every single game with the offense they do have. And obviously, adding him behind or in front of Noah Syndergaard would be a great 1-2 or 2-3 or whatever they figure out there because they obviously need, like I said, 5 whole new starters this offseason. So adding him there, that veteran presence that can eat innings and not lose you games, I think would be a great fit for him and for them.
Right. No, I definitely see that. Greinke, I think, while tricky, you know, he's going to go to a good team as well. I don't think he's going to settle for going to a mediocre team. I think he's going to try to go to a team that at least on paper has some odds. And the Angels, they're always an enigma coming into a season, right? So I think that's what makes it interesting. I think relatively speaking, we both kind of have the right idea here. Like, we could see him staying in Houston, but if he does go, it could be to a team like the Angels, uh, for sure. So, moving on, a late addition onto this list as we were crafting it, Kevin Gausman was an NL Cy Young of the Year candidate, you know, for this past season, was outstanding with the San Francisco Giants. 14-6 record, 2.81 ERA, 227 strikeouts, first All-Star appearance of his career. Dude was just an absolute unit. Really, he was the most reliable pitcher on that rotation. And how unlucky for them that he's hitting the market after a year like that because he was only signed to a 1-year deal. Now, I believe like they're trying to push to maintain him, and I think that's definitely a possibility. But for a guy like that to test the free agency market for the real first time in his career to get big money, this is what I think is going to be key here for some of these free agents, Dame, is that a couple of these guys are testing the free agency market for the first real time. Like, they're going to want to go through this process, and they're going to want to see who cough up a pretty penny for him. So where do you think Kevin Gausman's going to go?
It's a team that you mentioned earlier for Marcus Stroman. I have the Boston Red Sox. Obviously they're in dire need of a starting rotation as well, and they lost arguably maybe their best pitcher in that they had this past season, Eduardo Rodriguez to the Tigers. He's just not important enough for us to mention on this podcast. This is an elite podcast. He's not good enough. But Rodriguez did eat up a lot of innings for them. He helped them. He helped keep him in games sometimes. He even won him some games sometimes with some elite performances. So that leaves a hole in that rotation. Kevin Gausman obviously had the best year of his career. So bringing him on to the Red Sox, a team that really thrives on their offense as well. So it's not like Kevin Gausman has to come in here and be Jacob deGrom. He could come in here. Although he's better than Greinke. It's not a situation where it's like Kevin Gausman is going to be in the middle and not win you games, not lose you games. Kevin Gausman will win you a lot of games like he did for the Giants this year, as we saw. He's obviously going to command a lot of money coming off a career year, and I think the Red Sox are willing to pay that kind of money for starting pitching because they know that's what their hole was in their team this year. Their offense is there with JD Martinez, Bogarts, Devers, all these guys. They can hit. They just need that solid starting rotation that can eat up innings and keep them in games. And I think Kevin Gausman, you could slide him right into honestly that number one spot in that rotation. He's gonna have an immediate impact for that team.
That's a pretty good selection right there. I think Boston, I think there's one thing we can agree on, and I'll throw it to Chris in a second once I name my team for Gosman here, is the idea that Boston is likely going to go after pitching this offseason no matter what, because they need it. Uh, Definitely a good idea of them going after him. I'm actually going to take a page out of your book here, Dame. I'm going to go with the team that you mentioned earlier for one of these guys as well. I'm going to say the Chicago White Sox go after Gosman. I think Gosman it just feels like a perfect storm. You're going to lose a guy who's an AL Cy Young of the Year candidate this past season, Rodon. It was a really good 1-2-3 for Chicago. And why not just bring in a guy that, yeah, at least if we're basing off of last season, had a pretty good season, a high strikeout count, which I think they're going to desperately need in this lineup. Gosman, I think, of the main pitchers we've talked about, well, I think he's going to get a good contract. I don't think it's going to necessarily be a real break the bank contract. I think that's the key for the Chicago White Sox here. I think the idea of whatever pitcher they're going to get is that they need to get a guy that it's a reasonable price, but it's not too much. Like, I don't think they're going to go after a Robbie Ray. I don't think they would have gone after a Verlander had he hit the market. I think that they're going to go after a guy like a Gosman who's got a little bit of upside, relatively young speaking. I think he's 30, 31-ish, but the price tag will allow it so that they'll eventually be able to focus on their guys going forward. Because remember, there's a lot of young hitters here that eventually you're going to have to start paying them. So I think that's going to be the key for the Chicago White Sox here with Gosman. Chris, I just want to throw it over to you. Not necessarily where you think he's going, but, Dame picking the Red Sox after I picked them for Stroman, me picking the White Sox here, ironically, after he picked them for Kershaw. It kind of just seems tried and true, right, Chris, that both of those teams, the two Sox teams, like they have to go after pitching this offseason as a number one target?
Wait, you're asking, is that coincidental, you said? I don't know. I mean, there are two teams that I could see, making improvements to the pitching roster. So, I mean, it sounds to me like they're the most active in that department. So I mean, I guess. I mean, I do like the White Sox going after Gosman because, like, I don't know. Either way, I do think I like a veteran pitcher going to that team. I do think that veteran presence will help them, and especially it'll help their pitching. So yeah, I'm gonna go with your take on this one, Jurg. And I mean, Kershaw's great, but I don't know if Kershaw will be wanting to go to like an up and coming team. Like they could win obviously, but I do think he might want to go to like a contender. Whereas that one, I do think the timetable fits more with Gosman and them.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. It definitely makes sense. I just think like I find it ironic that we kind of trade some picks here with these two teams because I think at the end of the day, these clubs have to make additions to their starting rotation. I just think that's the most tried and true thing, no matter who we think they're going to go after. Speaking of who we think goes after whom, Robbie Ray is next on the list. Just recently named the AL Cy Young winner. Career highs all around the board for him. Amazing 2.84 ERA, 248 strikeouts, double-digit win season. Where could he go? I have a team. I got obviously he's going to go after that big money deal. I got a team that's going to break the bank with pitching this time. They've done it with hitters for a long time since they've had this guy. They already signed a pitcher to a 1-year deal this offseason, but that shouldn't stop him here. I got the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim going after Robbie Ray. I just think it makes sense, kind of like you said, Dame. They need to have 5 capable starters here. And while I think Syndergaard is good and Otani is there, they need that guy. Like they need the guy to lead this rotation here early. And I think Robbie Ray, he's coming off a season where he, of course, wins the award for being the best pitcher. This just feels like the kind of contract the Angels would give to a guy coming off a big year like this. They've done it before with players. They did it with Rendon. They did it with Pujols. You know, Pujols' contract didn't end well. The Rendon contract, sight remains to be seen, but it's not looking great. So let's take a risk on a pitcher here. Robbie Ray to the Angels, I think, makes a lot of sense. He's earned the money that he's going to get paid this offseason based off of last year. And I just think the Angels, like when we talk about needing to fill your needs, they have a pitching need. He's out there. Why not at this point? And I think it would just make sense. I think he right away he would become the ace of that rotation. So what do you think of that, Robbie Ray to the Angels? That would certainly be a big time signing for them.
That would be an extraordinary signing for them. Obviously, they need like we both said, they need 5 new starters. Why not go get Ray, Greinke, and Noah Syndergaard? Add 2 more because that's what you need. But unfortunately, I do have Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray obviously has been a very erratic and inconsistent pitcher throughout his career on the Diamondbacks and his first year on the Blue Jays. But he's turned his career around this season with the Jays, with changing his mechanics and really working hard to change what he has. But he obviously had career highs across the board. He had his best season ever, and I just don't see a better fit than staying with the Jays. Um, he's obviously was their best pitcher, and the Jays do need pitching to kind of match that extraordinary young lineup that they have. And while I don't see them really letting Robbie Ray go anywhere, I think they're going to match any kind of money that he's offered because they do need him. I don't see any other upgrade they have, whether it's a trade or free agency, that they can go after. So, and obviously he had his best season there, so he's comfortable there. Why would he want to leave? Why would the Jays want him to leave? So I just think it's a perfect marriage for them to just stay together.
Yeah, I definitely see your point there. And I think also with signing Barrios, I think it means that they're willing to pay to keep their at least top 2 in the pitching order right there. And especially because they still got some team control. A lot of these guys, that was a big deal, when we were waiting for Vladdy to make his MLB debut. Remember, Dame? Like they were talking about having team control and, arbitration and all that stuff when it comes to how much they really got to pay these guys. So I think they have a little bit of time here to play with. And I think them keeping Robbie Ray should be at the top of the list. And I definitely see that happening. I definitely agree with you. I think that the Blue Jays should match any offer no matter what to Robbie Ray, no matter what, because of how good he was for them this past season. But it's going to be interesting to see, how high that price tag does go. Because like these award winners, whenever they get to hit free agency, which isn't often, like they got to make sure they cash out, right? Especially in Major League Baseball.
Absolutely. So he could go back to the pitcher he was in Arizona. Like you never know. It was just a 1-year thing, so he better cash out as much as he can.
Absolutely. So that ends all the starting pitchers, but we do have one final pitcher here, the best reliever / closer on the market, Raisel Iglesias. So Dame, not much, I don't think there's too much to deliberate here. Obviously, when it comes to relievers and closers, it's situational. Some teams go after the big name, some teams don't. Where do you see Raisel Iglesias going this offseason? Who's gonna pay to get this man to help finish off games here?
Yeah, I feel like there's different relievers and different closers that are great every single year, and then they fall off the very next year. So it's kind of a guessing game with a lot of these relievers and closers. But I mentioned this team getting started before and spending a lot of money in the pitching department. I have the Iglesias going to the Boston Red Sox. Obviously, it hurts me that they're gonna. I predict they're gonna improve in the starting rotation and bullpen, but God, their bullpen was really awful after losing Craig Kimbrell. That bullpen just went downhill really quick. So after adding, in my opinion, Kevin Gausman to that rotation, adding Iglesias to the back end of that bullpen, closing games for them, would be extraordinary offseason for them because of the hitting they do have. So improving that starting rotation and adding the best closer on the market, I think would be a great offseason for them.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about that. I think that'd be a very quick way for helping out Boston to fix their pitching woes. For myself personally, I have Iglesias going to the Philadelphia Phillies. This team has really needed to work on pitching these last couple of off seasons. I think the hitting core is there for this squad. Maybe a depth piece here or there for them, but overall, I think the hitting's there. Bryce Harper played like an MVP candidate this past season. Hell, he is an MVP candidate. A lot of people didn't realize that until late in the year, but Bryce Harper was a superstar this past season. They have JT Realmuto. Like, they have bats, but it's all about consistency with the pitching. And Raisel Iglesias, while I know there have been ebbs and flows with him, I just think the raw talent is too much to pass up on. And I think for the Phillies, I don't care what the situation is right now. If Raisel Iglesias is there, if you're the Phillies, you got to throw the contract at him because he like you'll take a chance on a guy like that finding his groove once again. He had 34 saves last season. He's proven to be a good player before. And I think just for the Phillies, this bullpen needs as much help as it can get. And Iglesias doesn't hurt on the surface at all. Like he can only be a help there. So I mean, unless the curse really gets to him in Philly. But aside from that, I think Raisel Iglesias to the Phillies would be quite the signing there. So that ends all of our talk about pitchers here, but we are nowhere near done. We got the hitters
Now
to
the
go
fun
afterward.
stuff,
Yes, yes. Pitchers, we respect pitchers. We know that they're, of course, a key part to the game, but this is where the sexy highlights are, when it comes to
especially this
baseball.
class of hitters. These are some of the best hitters in the league.
Absolutely. So we're not going to waste any time here, Damon. I think it really could, we could go either way here, Dame, but let's not waste any time. Let's start with the big fish in this market. Carlos Correa. He's going to be a free agent. He's going to, he's performed very well, all-star, Silver Slugger in his career, key part to the Astros, who have made 3 World Series, 5 straight ALCSs. Dude has grown ever since they drafted him. But it seems that it's time for a split. It seems that they're not going to be able to keep him. So, Dame, of course, he's one of those guys where people are going to throw 10 different teams at him where he could go. Where is Carlos Correa going to go? And if you want to, actually, you could throw out the specific contract with him because I think he's definitely going to get a really big money deal here. So, where's Carlos Correa going to be suiting up for in the 2022 campaign?
Well, since the Astros are just absolutely disrespecting him with the offer they gave him, I think there's no chance he goes back there. And it's really tough for me because I think the Yankees are a fit there, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think the fit for him is the Detroit Tigers. I think it's kind of a similar situation to the Padres a couple years ago, Manny Machado, when they were really a rebuilding team and you saw the kind of young talent that they did have and they were upcoming and they just wanted to add that big money piece to put in that lineup and really jumpstart that rebuild. So I think a similar thing is going to happen here with the Detroit Tigers and Carlos Correa. Obviously, there's the relationship that he has with AJ Hinch, his former cheating manager. So that's a great cheating mesh they have right there together. And obviously, the Tigers don't have any big money contracts. They're one of the lowest payrolls in the league. So Carlos Correa will definitely be looking for an extremely big deal, 300 million plus for 10 years or whatever it is. And I think the Detroit Tigers are going to be able to pay that. He's definitely going to break Manny Machado's thing. So let's just hypothetically saying, I think 10-year, $350 million to beat Lindor's deal. I think that's going to be a thing as well. And obviously, Detroit Tigers, like I said, they aren't paying anyone, so that shouldn't be a problem, especially if they're trying to jumpstart these rebuild. And honestly, get fans into that stadium because I can't even name you 5 players on the Detroit Tigers right now because of how bad that roster is. So adding Carlos Correa, veteran piece, could help those young players that they have upcoming as well. So I think that's just a perfect fit right there.
Right. I think I agree with you. I think Carlos Correa to Detroit just makes sense. The reuniting with Hinch there, it makes sense. I think ultimately the biggest thing with him returning, well, with him going to Detroit, I should say, is that, like you said, this would be a spark plug for Detroit needing to go into phase 2 of the rebuild, which phase 2 is exactly what we saw from the Padres. You've collected the young talent now. We need to start to see some progression, but you got to go out there and make at least one big signing. I think Correa would be the guy. He gets butts and seats. He's a name that people will recognize, and I think in today's Major League Baseball climate, you got to give people a reason to go to the stadiums for these long games. I think Correa would make people want to go to Detroit. He's a marketable superstar, right? Like it makes sense there. Of course, it takes more than one player, but I think Carlos Correa to Detroit would help make a difference and would slowly start to turn things around for the organization. And he's just a guy. He's a name, and it just fits. Chris, been a bit since we've gone to you. You don't have to give too in depth of it, but do you think Detroit, while they might be a rebuilding team because they had such a good end to the season, they finished just below 500, is it time for them to make a big time splurge in free agency here?
Well, look, I don't know how it works with baseball, but is there a thing? Is there such thing as like a purgatory team, like we say in basketball?
Relatively, yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so does this move make them a purgatory team? Like I know it's Detroit, and you kind of like at this point, and you talked about it, Jurg. I think butts and seats is also important, and it's Detroit. Not a lot of people want to go there. I, I feel like I don't know what their goals are. I think if they have decent young players in play, and they have a good farm system, and they have a good developmental system, um, then yeah, you go for it because you trust in your organic progression and like your talent that you've already established. You trust them in making that next step, and you trust Correa as that guy that pushes you forward. And if they, like it just I don't know. Like if this move makes him a purgatory team, and you guys probably know more than I do, don't do it. But if if everything's kind of set in play, and you see some things like the Toronto Blue Jays, for example, follow the Tampa Bay Rays model. If like the kind of if everything's established in like that order, if I could see them going that route, then yeah, sure. But if they're stuck being a purgatory team, and that's Korea's just there for kind of like have a name, like obviously he's a superstar, but to like have a name and to like kind of put butts in seats, I don't know. I think you're going towards the wrong direction. But I mean, for Korea, I don't know. Does he want to sign with the Detroit Tigers, or is this more like screw it? I just want to get my money. I don't know. You guys might know more than I do.
I think money when it comes to Correa. I just think he wants to get paid, and he's also kind of a guy where it's like he's had success early on in his career. He's had the individual accolades, and he's going to put up the stats where he's going to continue to rack up some accolades. So why not go out there and get your payday? And if Detroit's going to give it to him, like I don't like it's just this has been the most popular report so far. And I think it would take something very substantial for him to not end up becoming a Detroit Tiger personally. In regards to the purgatory thing, like Dame, my thing with being a quote unquote purgatory team is like, I don't think the Tigers are there yet because they've been rebuilding to this point. Like, I think a purgatory team is kind of what the Oakland A's have kind of been, where it's like they're good. They're either going to barely miss or barely make the playoffs, and then they're going to get destroyed. Like, I don't think Detroit's there yet, technically speaking.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just see it as a exact same situation as the Padres. Like they're not really in ML because they have such a great farm system. Like they just had the number one pick a couple years ago. Obviously, Casey Mize was a first round pick, and he's looked absolutely fantastic so far in MLB. And they still have a top five farm system. I think they might even be number one or something like that. Like they have a lot of young players coming up, so putting Carlos Correa right in that middle of that lineup will definitely help them be better in the major league level and help improve the youngsters around them as well. Not put as much pressure on them to perform right away. Uh, just to mention something, Jeff Passan, the MLB insider, literally tweeted like 9 minutes ago that Carlos Correa and AJ Hinch had breakfast together today.
Oh my god!
So, obviously that doesn't mean anything that he's gonna sign there immediately, but it's something, right? Like he's not going all the way to Detroit to meet with this guy for no reason.
You don't go to Detroit. My bad, Dame. You don't go to Detroit to just have breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure real conversations about him joining there definitely happen. So that's something to keep an eye on.
So no Yankees, Dame, for Correa?
Listen, I wouldn't be mad if he came there, but once he doesn't sign here, I'm gonna say I never wanted him in the first place. That's the kind of timing I'm on.
Well, maybe it was just me. I could have sworn a day or two ago I saw an article about Correa saying that like he said some not nice things about Derek Jeter.
God, that's so stupid. He said Derek Jeter didn't deserve any of the Gold Gloves he had. Like, come on, son. Like, I don't even think he'd be welcomed here by most fans. But to me personally, it's just like I'll take any player that improves this team because they just got me so angry the last couple of years that any player that improves the team like Carlos Correa, I know would. I don't care what they said or what they did in the past. Like, just come here, perform, and please win me a championship. That's all I care about. But I know comments like that wouldn't go well with a lot of other kind of fans.
Right. It definitely makes sense. I just think like when I saw that, I'm like, oh, it's probably done. I don't see.
And you don't really say that if like the Yankees are a real option. Like like he's not a stupid guy. He wouldn't have said that if the Yankees were a serious contender to get him.
Yeah, that's for certain. Okay, so moving on, let's get on with it, especially the shortstop market. I'll be quick here. Corey Seager. Now, Corey Seager to me is very intriguing because he's shown to be pretty good. He was part of that run in the 2010s where the Dodgers just kept producing the NL Rookie of the Year. Had a lot of potential early, had some injuries like to the last 3-4 seasons. So it's kind of diminished him. I still think he's pretty talented, but I don't see a big time team offering him like the big time deal. It could go either way. I could see him taking a short-term deal. I could still see him signing long-term. This is the guy that I have signing with a weird team here, Dame. And the weird team I have signing Corey Seager is the Kansas City Royals. The Kansas City Royals were just below the Detroit Tigers in the standings of the Central last season. I think the Royals, when I look at the shortstop position, it's not cut and dry. Seager, I think, has some flexibility in the infield. And I think when the Dodgers got Trey Turner, it just kind of guaranteed that he wasn't going to go back there. And I think just Seager to Kansas City, like it kind of makes sense. I know he's won a championship. He performed well for the Dodgers in the postseason. Let's keep it real here. Like, he was amazing for them. So, and I believe he was World Series MVP, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was. He was.
Yeah, so this guy who's a World Series MVP, he's got that on his resume. He's going to get a good chunk of change. And I think the Kansas City Royals, like, it just, they feel like the weird team that's going to sign a guy this offseason. And Seager to the Kansas City makes sense. He feels the need for them. And while I still think they're a step or two behind where Detroit is, I could see a scenario where Kansas City goes after the plan early and they just go and get a guy just to have him. And I think Seager, it makes sense. You know, add another bat to the lineup. He could get 25 plus homers, collect some good hits, is a solid defender. Like, I think if the Royals went for that deal, I don't think it's a bad contract at all, because I just think you're bringing a good all-around player into your organization.
That's a good fit. It's very similar to the Correa thing, but I'm going to give my Yankees some love here, and I'm going to say Corey Seager's a good fit for the Yankees because I don't know what's so funny over there, guy.
You're funny, guy.
But obviously, shortstop is a big need for them. Gleyber Torres hasn't really panned out there, and Brian Cashman has been adamant about shortstop being the primary need for them this offseason. Now, obviously, the big thing with the Yankees is they don't like to spend money. Why? I literally don't understand. Wow. Like, they are the New York Yankees. They're the biggest team in sports. They obviously have the money. Like, I just don't get it why they don't want to go over a luxury tax and spend money. Like, you literally are known for winning, and you see what the Dodgers are doing. They're going all in. They had like a $270 million payroll this year. They don't care about no luxury tax as long as they're winning. And you saw what the Yankees did this season. Like, they underperformed immensely. Like, you need to go spend money and make this team better. And I don't think there's a better fit than Corey Seager. Obviously, put him at shortstop. He's a left-handed bat, which the Yankees desperately need in that lineup. He's a low strikeout guy. He hits for contact, and obviously his power numbers are going to go up if he plays at Yankee Stadium with that right field short porch. So that's going to help as well. He's a good defensive shortstop, and the main thing is that the Yankees' top two prospects are shortstops, so that kind of might halt their pursuit of a shortstop. But the thing is with Corey Seager, a lot of smart people, smart scouts are saying that it's going to be an easy transition for him to move from shortstop to third base eventually. So that's perfect for the Yankees because you could bring Corey Seager, you have him play shortstop for the first 2 years of that big contract. And then once these young kids are ready, because they're younger, fresher legs and all that, you just move them to shortstop and you move Corey Seager over to third base, which a lot of scouts are saying he's going to be able to do easily. So you're going to have your young prospect, either one of them, move into shortstop and then move Corey Seager over to third base for the rest of his career, which will help with injuries because he has had an injury-ridden career. So moving him over shortstop will kind of halt that because he doesn't have to move as much as he does at shortstop. And just overall, I think it's a perfect fit for Corey Seager. Now, if the Yankees spend money, that's a whole nother thing. I hope they do because Corey Seager fills a need in as a left-handed hitter and as a shortstop, and the transition for him is easy from shortstop to third base in a couple of years, which the Yankees would need for him to do. So I hope it happens. I need it to happen, but I'm not getting my hopes up.
Sounds like you got it all planned out, Dane.
Yeah, I would if I was running the Yankees, but
bro, just run the Yankees, bro. Easy.
Honestly, it's not even running the Yankees. Like, Brian Cashman runs the Yankees. I'm sure he'd go all out for Corey Seager. It's those fucking Steinbrenners are just cheap fucking cunts.
Nice.
Well, more so Baby Steinbrenner, because at least the elder, it felt like
yes.
If
it was George Steinbrenner, bro, I'm telling you, we'd have Max Scherzer, Corey Seager, and Freddie Freeman this offseason. I know it would happen, but he's not here, so God bless.
Where is he?
Well,
he's dead, bro.
He's in heaven?
Well, I don't know about that.
He's in heaven after winning all these World Series for us and spending the money. He's in my heaven.
Okay. So my only thing about Seager is that I think of the shortstops. I know Damon's talking about moving him to third. I think of the shortstops, he's third or fourth in terms of who I think will get highest paid. And so I think if you're going after the third or fourth highest guy, that should incentivize the Yankees. That's just my opinion, the way I see it. I definitely see him as a fit. And I think I like Dame's idea more. If you could move him to third base and then just have one of the youngsters come up to play short, because eventually you got to let these prospects just play for this team. Like, you just have to see what you have. So I think, Seager, signing him, moving him to third, it would make a lot of sense. And I like the contract. To me, it's not going to be as big as most of our guys. Like, Seager at $200 million in his contract, maybe even less than that, like a 6-year, $170 million, something like that. Like, that's not a bad deal, at least in my opinion. So I definitely could see the fit there. Damn, I'm going to go right back to you with this next guy, Freddie Freeman. Now, it's a lot of questions about Freeman and what his future could be. in Atlanta. A lot of people are saying that the Braves will just give him a blank check, that they'll just keep him. A lot of people are saying that he's going to leave. What are your thoughts about Freddie Freeman? Is his time in Atlanta done? Was the World Series his sunset, right into the sunset, or is he staying there?
I just don't see how he leaves there, and I don't see how the Braves could possibly let him go. I saw a report that to start the offseason, they offered him 5 for 135, which is about, I think, $27 or $28 million per year, and that should not be enough for Freddie Freeman. He's the best first baseman in the league. He just helped you win a World Series. Like, you need to make sure he's the highest paid first baseman in the league, at least $30 million a year. I heard a sticking point is that 6 year, that Freeman wants 6 years. Man, if he wants 6 years, $30 million, go give him 6 years, $180 million, $30 million per year, and get it done. Like, you cannot have this guy leave your team, or you're going to absolutely go downhill next season. He's your veteran piece. He's that left-handed bat. He's a great defensive first baseman. Like, you cannot let him leave. I would love him on the Yankees. Left-handed bat, first base is another hole for the Yankees. Great defender as well. But I just don't see that happening at all. I know they met with him and his agents, but obviously you haven't seen much reports after that, so I just don't think that's going to go anywhere, and I just don't see him leaving the Braves at all. He obviously loves it there. He's spoken a lot of times about how much he loves it there, so I think him and the Braves both need it to happen and both want it to happen. I just think that's, at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess Freddie's a free man this offseason, right?
Oh my god.
No, I'm out.
There's Chris's contribution for the rest of the segment. Anyways, yeah, I definitely agree. I would say I would want to keep Freddie Freeman in Atlanta because unlike a lot of these guys, I don't think Freddie Freeman's gonna age poorly. I really don't. I think him being at first base is a big reason for that. I think if he was an outfielder, it would be a bigger concern, or shortstop. But being at first base, like, how many defensive plays does he really have to make? Like, he's a good defender too, by the way. I'm not, taking a shot at his defense, but I'm just saying, like, you don't have to worry about him defensively. I think he's going to be fine. I don't think his power is going to go down that much. Like, I think he's still going to be a 30-plus home run hitter, at least the next couple seasons. I can understand sort of why the sticking point would be the 6 years, but I think a lot of guys in Freeman's case, like, a lot of guys who have hit the market at his age, they ask for 8, 9, 10-year deals. If Freeman just wants 6, like, this is what I think, Dame. If you sign him to a 6-year deal, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Acuna has 6 years left on his contract. Like, if you sign Freeman to 6 years, you finish his career, and then you have to pay Acuna, but the Freeman contract comes off the books. Like, you're dead set if you're Atlanta in that situation.
Actually, bro, like, they have no one on a big contract. Like, Acuna and Albies are both on team-friendly deals. Like, go spend money on the guy that came out of your system and help you win a World Series. Go make it happen.
Yeah, agreed. I think, myself personally, I'm always questionable on being too loyal to guys, but I don't think Freddie Freeman is the type of player that you can go wrong with the loyalty factor to. I really don't, because I don't think he's going to fall off that much. Even if in the final 2 years of his contract, he only becomes like a 20-25 home run hitter, still, that's A, pretty good, and B, it's only 1 or 2 years you'd have to deal with. It's not like the Albert Pujols deal or the Miguel Cabrera deal or Chris Davis. It's not going to be anything like that. Like, it's just not. Freddie Freeman is so good. He takes care of himself. Like, he's been pretty healthy throughout a lot of his career, especially recently. Like, I think Freddie Freeman, it makes sense. Don't lose him for something stupid. Like, don't lose him for a dumb reason. Keep him if you can, Atlanta. And I think the contract we're talking about, 6 years at like 180, 6 years at maybe like 190, like, that's more than fair for him. So I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Moving on, Starling Marte, not the biggest name technically, but he's a guy, Dame, that I don't know if you've read the reports as well. Like, his market is apparently hot. A lot of teams want to go after him. He's just a guy who's a valuable hitter. He can hit up to 20 homers for you, maybe even 25. But it's just the ability for him to get on base, just get hits. Like, this dude can collect hits, right? He could just rake. So for myself personally, I mentioned this team earlier that they need to focus more on pitching, but I think if they go after him as a hitter, I think that would actually be a surplus for them because they could add him into the outfield and he kind of differentiates from some of the other hitters in their lineup. I'm going with the Philadelphia Phillies. I think this should be the offseason where the Phillies go for a push. We have our questions about the Braves going into next season. The Mets are the Mets. I think there's an opportunity here for the Phillies to finally, be the princes that have been promised these last couple seasons and go after the NL East. And I think Raisel Iglesias and Starling Marte would be two outstanding additions there. So I got Marte going to the Phillies.
I'm just gonna go with these next two players that we have, Marte and Chris Brown, because I have them going to the same team.
Oh.
I'm gonna give Chris some love here. I'm gonna have both of them with the New York Mets. I think this is when the Mets change their offseason around. I think both these guys are perfect fits for them. Let me start Marte. Like you said, his market is extremely high right now because he's the only really premium center fielder, true center fielder that there is on the market right now. He does everything you could ask in a center fielder. He has contact, speed, power. He gets on base. He steals bases. He does everything you could ask for in a center fielder. And he's not old either, so it's not like he's going to play there for a year or two and move off. Like, he's going to probably be in center field for the rest of his contract, whatever it is. So that's why he has all these teams on him. And obviously, the Mets have a need at center field. They had Brandon Nimmo there last season. It's a cool name, Brandon Nimmo, but he's not that good of a player. You could easily move off him. He's honestly a fourth outfielder on a contending team and a good team. So putting adding Starling Marte to the center field, you get your defense, which the Mets defense is awful, so that vastly improves there. You get speed when he gets on the bases. He gets contact. He gets on base. He hits for power as well. He's everything you can ask for with the Mets and the center fielder, which they have been looking for years. And now moving on to Chris Bryant. I think it's another great signing right there. I know they were rumored to try to trade for him, and that really never worked out. But they have a need at third base as well. Obviously, you have Lindor at shortstop. You could easily, even if you don't re-sign Javier Baez, you could put Jeff McNeil back at second base, which is his natural position, which I'm really big on that. Like, you should really play players at the natural position unless they're elite somewhere else. And where they were playing McNeil was the outfield, which he absolutely looked really bad there and uncomfortable. So putting him back at his natural position at second base, I think, is ideal for them. And then adding Chris Bryant, his bat and his defense at third base would be extraordinary for them. Imagine that infield: Chris Bryant, Lindor, Jeff McNeil, and Pete Alonso. Like, that's a great defensive infield and a great hitting infield as well. And obviously, Chris Bryant is very versatile as well. His primary position is third base, but he could play right field, left field. You could even put him in center field if, say, you do sign Marte. Like, you could give Marte a day off. You could put Chris Bryant out there. Or if you don't sign Marte, you could always put Chris Bryant in center field as well. So just adding these two guys based off all the things they could do, how versatile they are on defense, how the speed that they give that lineup, and the hitting that they give that lineup, I think these two guys would be a perfect signing for the Mets and that lineup, which obviously the hitting was their biggest problem last year.
Okay, Chris. We heard some celebration there. How ecstatic would you be if you got Marte and Bryant to play for the blue and orange?
I'd be very ecstatic. I'm more ecstatic than finding out that Damon is a closet Mets fan. After these two predictions. So thanks, Dame. I'll take it. I'll definitely take it. If those two moves happen, what's the ceiling for the Mets? Little spoiler alert for your little
absolutely
projections.
Become one of the contenders. They obviously, if they do lose Stroman and Noah Syndergaard, they will have to figure out how to improve that starting rotation. But with the prospects they have and all the ammo they do have, if they sign those two guys, they'll absolutely be able to go out and trade for any star that's available and shore up that rotation because they won't need to really upgrade anything in their lineup.
Cool. Well, I'll take it.
Nice. I'm going to run through these next two names really fast, not because I got them going to the same team, just because. So I got Chris Bryant just staying in San Fran. I think there's a chance because Buster Posey retired. I have Gosman leaving. I think for the Giants, there's going to be some turnover. I think they want to keep a couple pieces there, and I could see them wanting to keep Bryant for at least a little bit, he played pretty well for them, and you said yourself, Dame, he's a great bat, could be a Silver Slugger candidate, defensive versatility on him, like you could just place him anywhere in your lineup, it feels like. So I got Bryant staying in San Fran. Nick Castellanos is an interesting candidate, right? He for a good chunk of the season, a lot of people had him in the NL MVP conversation. I personally didn't really see him as a true contender for it, but he still had a phenomenal year for himself. 30-plus homers, like close to 100 RBI, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe just a little bit below that from memory. Actually, yes, 100 RBI on the dot. So I have him going to the Miami Marlins. I think Nick Castellanos is just going to cash out. I think he's going straight up for money. This is a chance for him to just make the big bucks in this contract. He's never been on a winner, really. I don't think he's going to focus too much on that. And I think in terms of dollars, the Marlins got to do something. They got to add something to that team. They got to add some pop. They got to try to convince some extra people to want to go to that godforsaken stadium that I think it's not really the name of it, but it's essentially Home Depot Stadium now, because Home Depot, I think, was the company that agreed to a naming rights deal with them. So you got to do something there. I think if you're Jeter, he's not the main decision maker, but if you're Jeter in the organization, and Castellanos could be a guy, you add some power into the lineup, which I think this team really needs power. The Marlins have great young pitching. So if the pitching can come back around and be really good, I think that there's a chance there for them to at least be semi-competitive, at least a 70 to 75 win team, maybe pushing on like 77-ish. And Castellanos can help with that. I just don't see him staying in Cincinnati. He opted out for a reason. I don't see him remaining there. And you go down to Miami. It's Miami. It's the clear oceans. It's a tax-free state. Like Castellanos, he also hasn't really had that chance to get paid yet. And I think the Marlins, like they gotta pay at least someone something. So I got Castellanos going down to good old 305.
Well, look at that. We have the same prediction right there. I have Nick Castellanos to the Marlins as well. He's all you can ask for in a hitter. He's not a high strikeout guy. He hits for contact. He hits for power, like you said, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs. He drives guys in, and he just played for Cincinnati Reds, so I don't think he really cares where he's gonna go, like contender wise. So the Marlins, they are upcoming team. Like they have shown promise with their that starting rotation and the young hitters they do have. So adding a guy like Nick Castellanos, you can put him right in that number 3 hole in that lineup will vastly improve them. Will vastly improve the guys around him because of the pressure he's going to take off them. And yeah, obviously the Marlins don't have a lot of money on their payroll, so throwing at a pure hitter like Castellanos is definitely going to help them, and definitely something they can afford to do. And Derek Jeter has said how he's not really that much of a patient owner, but he tries to be. But he leaves all the decision making up to their GM. I don't know her name, but it's like the first female GM. So I think big move she's going to do is sign Nick Castellanos and put it right in the middle of that lineup.
Wouldn't be bad at all. I think for the Marlins, they need someone there. And I think Castellanos does make a lot of sense. Coming off a big season, too, I think, I could see like a 5-year, like $120-130 million contract to him, honestly, something in that range for him going to Miami. And again, tax-free, like, of all the teams, like, if you're going to get $130 million from the Marlins and $130 million from, like, just a shot in the dark, like the Angels, like, let's say, like, I'm taking the Marlins. Because again, just the taxes, like the money you'll get to keep there, there's as much of a chance of winning. Like at least the Marlins pitching rotation has a future, unlike the Angels. Like it's just that's the situation that I see personally. So I know I've been going back and forth, but I want to start off with this next guy here, Dame, because I'm really interested to see if this team does this. Now, they're going to be losing their starting shortstop in this offseason, as we both said. He's going to be heading over to the AL Central. So I believe with this next guy being on the market, they should go after him because you don't really lose a lot of power and you get a still pretty
We
dang
might
good
have the
defender.
same guy, same team again.
Trevor Story to the Houston Astros,
Yep.
Dame. I just think it makes sense. You got to keep Verlander. It's a really fluid situation there right now. I just think Story would be a perfect complement to recomplete the infield. I think he adds power. He's had 25 plus homers, I think, each of the last however many seasons. He only had 24 this year. But let's be real here. I think Colorado was bringing anybody down last season. The only team worse than Colorado in the NL West was the Arizona Diamondbacks. What does that say about your franchise? I think with him going there, it makes sense. It fits. It's not that steep of a drop off. And the price, honestly, I think you'll relatively save. You're going to have to pay him, obviously, but it's not you're not breaking the bank. You don't really have to worry about it compared to a lot of people. So I believe Story to Houston makes sense. Dame, well, it sounds like we agree.
Yep, like you said, they lost Carlos Correa, and I don't think Trevor Story and Carlos Correa's numbers based off their contract is going to be anywhere near each other. So this is something the Astros are definitely going to afford, and obviously I don't see them being a team that's going to break it all down and rebuild. They're definitely going to still try to contend, and obviously losing Zach Greinke, that's more money off the books. Verlander's contract now I think is less than what he was making the previous year, so you have that money off the books, and obviously Correa's money off the books. So they will have a little bit of wiggle room to spend. I think that wiggle room will be for Trevor Story. You bring him in, you fill the void of Carlos Correa. Obviously, he's not as good, but making less money will kind of equal out each other, and they'll still be one of the contenders in the AL and contending for a World Series.
Absolutely. That's for certain. Last name on our list, name. This dude had a really, it sounds weird to say this, but this dude had a quiet 45 homer season up in the Great White North. There are a lot of big names around him, sons of former MLB players. So it kind of makes sense, but he more than held his own in the lineup and was very critical for them in the season. Marcus Semien for the Toronto Blue Jays had a massive year, easily a career year for him after just 1 year in Toronto with being a lifelong athletic up to that point. Who do you have go? Because I think, Dame, of the hitters, Semien is the most intriguing one. Because we just saw him have this big season, but this is like, it could be an anomaly because this is the biggest season he's ever had. And I think he's pretty good defensively. He's got some versatility. And I believe he won the Gold Glove this season, or at least he was a real candidate for it. So it's like, what do you do with a guy like Simeon? Like Simeon, it feels like he could go to a good team, or he could just like go to like one of these weird teams that we've talked about. Where do you see him going?
Um, he played shortstop all this year, and throughout his career, he played second base this year. Sorry, and throughout his career, played shortstop. So he made that
Right.
transition pretty seemingly, and obviously it didn't hurt him on the offensive end. He played great on both sides of the ball. Um, this was tough for me. It was between two teams, but I am going to the San Francisco Giants. The Giants have been ruined for a couple years. That they've been looking to sign a big free agent. I know they were really big on Bryce Harper a couple years ago when he signed with the Phillies, and now they have Brandon Crawford at shortstop, but he's been kind of injured on and off, so they could really move him to third base or second base, or do what they want with him. But I think signing Marcus Semien would be great for them. You could, like I said, he plays second base this year, so you could even leave Brandon Crawford at shortstop and move Semien to second base, and he'll be great there. Semien really came out of nowhere. The 40 home runs he had this year, no one expected that to happen. No one knew he had this kind of power in him. So the Giants, for years, have been looking to sign that big marquee free agent. I think this is the year they finally do it, Marcus Semien. I'm sure they'll be in on Carlos Correa and Corey Seager, but I think they will, like I said, sign somewhere else. So Marcus Semien would not be a bad consolation prize, obviously, because of the year he had. You could even argue out of the four shortstop we named, Semien, Story, Seager, and Correa. Honestly, if you look at the numbers, you could say Semien had the best year out of all of them. So it would not be a bad consolation prize for the Giants. And they were obviously had the best record in the league, so they're improving off that.
Right. And at the end of the day, with a guy like Simeon, he's going to be a high value commodity, I think, from a lot of different organizations. And the Giants, I spoke about it earlier. They could potentially lose quite a few guys this offseason. Simeon could be, a nice band-aid, quote unquote, to the offseason to, you get a high quality name, had that career year last year and hope that he could continue that. And I mean, if we're going based on last season, guys apparently are going to have good years in San Fran because last year was just magic for him. I have him returning to the AL West, actually. I have him going to the Seattle Mariners. I know the infield, is relatively young in Seattle. I know they got a couple of pieces, but I think they were right there for the AL wild card. Again, this just feels like the kind of decision that a team like Seattle would make. They were right there. What could they do? What's a name they could bring in? Boom, Marcus Semien with all those home runs. He just screams like the kind of guy that Seattle would go after in an offseason like this to try to see if they could overtake the Astros. I think with the A's, I think there's so many questions with that Oakland A's team. I know they're going to have their runs, and I know they did have a run way earlier in the season, like some crazy winning streak they had, but obviously they missed the playoffs. I think the Mariners have an opportunity here to be the definitive second best team, and the Astros, we have to see how the offseason goes for them. So at the end of the day, I think Seattle, like this could be their time where they make a move. I wouldn't be shocked if they go after one of the pitchers or the hitters here. Maybe you could argue they should go after the pitching with that rotation, but I see them going after someone, and Marcus Semien again makes sense. Kind of like with Stroman and my Red Sox stuff earlier. They know him. They faced him plenty of times. I think they would like to have him in their lineup, and it's just something that I could see happening. And he's familiar with that division, familiar with the West Coast in general. So Marcus Semien returning there, playing for the Seattle Mariners. Why not? Why not at all? And that concludes.
That's actually the other team I had besides the Giants is between them
Oh,
two. So that's a really good pick as well. Like the Mariners obviously showed that they can contend and almost won the wild card out of nowhere. So they'll definitely be in on a lot of these free agents because they feel they're right there and they're just going to add any kind of piece they can to their lineup to really get over that hump.
well, would you look at that? So many agreements in these last couple of picks here. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So that kind of concludes our MLB, free agent fit game here. And I think, between both of us, there's some agreements, some disagreements, but I think overall, I think our minds are in the right place with every single selection, Dame. I think we got good picks for all these guys. In regards to where they could potentially end up if for the 2022 season. And I think we're going to get a couple of these right. And of course, there's a chance that we just get none of them right because, why the hell not? But yeah, that concludes it here. Chris, our fearless leader, what were your thoughts about how this went? And, carry us off, brother.
Phenomenal job as always, Jurg. Loved your picks. Yeah, we'll end it at that. So, everyone.
Whoa.
Come on now.
No,
Dame
no,
gave
no.
you
I'm
some
just yeah,
messages.
no.
Blessed up your Mets.
Dame had some good picks. You guys both had good picks. Usually when we do these predictions games, like we strike out on like every cylinder. So who knows? But it's still fun to kind of guess and bragging rights. If you get them right. So Yeah, good job as always, you two. Very proud, very proud. Yeah, so that'll be it for this week. Jurg, where can they find us on the socials, bud?
You guys already know it is the SomeWhat.Sports Instagram page, and if you're listening to the pod, you've already found our YouTube channel. Continue like, comment, share, subscribe on the YouTube. Like and comment and share our posts on Instagram, man. I always say this, just give someone the gift of one of the, if not the greatest sports podcasts in the world going to date. We're big everywhere. We're big in, the East Hemisphere. We're big in the West Hemisphere. The Amish, like to break tradition. They listen to us as well, guys. So listen to the trendiest sports podcast going right now.
Yep. Beautifully said as always, Jurg. Just gassing us. Crazy. Yeah. To all of our listeners, thank you for listening to this whole episode. We appreciate it. Jurg and Dame, thank you as always. You guys are great. And until next time, peace.
Peace.